ICQ Podcast episode 257, Setting Up a Second Shack. Well, Happy New Year to you, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this our 257th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin is joined by Chris, Mike 0 TCH, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on setting up a second shack. Well, as always, it's our donations that keep the show advert-free. We'd like you to consider us on the early part here of 2018 by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send away is always greatly appreciated and will help us out along with those monthly subscription donors that help us out along our way. Well, now we join Martin, Chris, Martin, Dan and Ed to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including RSGB guidance resource and first Transatlantic 472 kHz band contact. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 257 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight, first episode of 2018, I have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH, with me.
Happy New Year, Martin, and to our listeners.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Chris. I also have Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Good evening and Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah. We have Mr. Dan Romanchik over in the States, KB6NU.
Happy New Year and great to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. And we also have Ed Durrant, DD5LP, over there in Germany. So this is the international show, really, where we've got 3 countries covered.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say Happy New Year to everybody as well. I was trying to think what it was in German, but I'd probably mess it up. So I'll stick with the English.
I'll let you off, Ed, but I can't get over the day when we sat opposite you in Friedrichshafen and you were chatting to a guy in German and you turned to me and instead of switching into English, you gave me a long discussion in German. Yeah. And I was like, hang on, Ed, can you do it in English? And you was wondering why I wasn't responding. That was a good one. But, yeah, not a problem. Okay, our first news story is really States-based, but I thought it was quite interesting. The UK Ham Radio Guidance Resource, the RSGB have produced this, and it's a way of finding a sample copy of the license, the guidance notes for the goes with the license, and some very, very good maps showing some of the license regulations actually graphical. So, Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
So it's quite a good link. It's got some. I think what it's good is it's sometimes it's quite difficult to find everything in one place. So you'll sort of. I sometimes struggle to find, for example, the license conditions for the amateur radio license. In fact, if you go onto the Ofcom site, it's actually it's part of your license, but it's not in the place where you get your license. You just get the kind of cover sheet and the the information about you, but not the bit about all the importance of about what you can do with your license. So this is a nice place. You can go to all the information. It's all in the same place and makes it all nice and easy. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, I've got to ask the question, Chris. You mentioned it's obviously this is run by the RSGB, and you go to the Ofcom website looking for, say, for example, your license conditions and stuff. What happens when Ofcom update the license conditions? How quickly will the RSGB sites be updated?
It's a great question. They need to.
Would we run the risk of having something that's out of date? But it says this on the RSGB website. But the RSGB haven't updated their website yet.
I have noticed this links to Ofcom. All the various other things. There are some other maps and things on there as well, which link to third-party websites. So,
which are great, assuming that third parties don't change the links on their website.
I suppose RSGB perhaps just need to keep an eye on that and just check to make sure that if there is a change, they have got dates on there, which is good. So it shows that the date on the documents are mentioned on the website. So to maintain that is something they have to do, I suppose. So so what you don't want to do is, like, you get on a lot of websites, you go click on the link and it gives an error saying 404 not found.
Yeah. I think as long as the RSGB sit on top of this, keep making sure it's updated, and then it should be a really, really good thing. I like the fact that it's got the thing, for example, you can click on it and you can get a graphical map of, for example, where you can't use 431 to 432 in England around Charing Cross in London. I like that. It's a nice little addition for those that can't think, well, am I in 100 miles? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's great. And Ed, you were talking about maritime mobile. I mean, a lot of the licensing, and I was saying earlier, I think it must have changed. Well, it feels to me like it's changed 10 times in the last 20 years. It's become too complicated in my books.
Yeah, I mean, the text that we've started this off in is in the show notes, of course, made a reference to the fact that foundation licenses can only operate within inland waters. However, the clarifications and the guidance documents here point out that that's actually not true, that it's actually anywhere within the British maritime waters, territorial waters, and foundation and intermediate licenses. And of course, full license can operate anywhere maritime mobile. But it's a central place for several documents, and as has been said, they'll need to be kept up to date. And it's good that they're gathering them together, because finding your way around the Ofcom website is a challenge.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you mentioned when we started on this story, and I said there's not a lot in it for yourself, apart from you did ask a lot of questions on the various maps, but also, I mean, in the States you have a similar thing in that you're not allowed to operate certain frequencies along the Canadian border, are you?
Right. And so I personally, even though I live close to the Canadian border, I've never been able to actually figure that out. So maybe something like that would be good for us.
Yeah.
But it all this seems really complicated to me. I mean, these waters and all that. And I don't know, maybe there's something in here. What about in the colonies? Can you use a foundation license in the Bahamas, for example? Is the Bahamas even still a British colony? I don't know.
It's a good question, and the answer is you can't.
You can't? Oh, okay.
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah.
Well, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you can.
Bahamas isn't signed up to CEPT. If it was signed up to CEPT and you had a full license, then you could.
I think you can actually, and don't hold me as gospel without going looking this one up for definite, but I think you can operate as a foundation license holder on Gibraltar, because it's a British territory. I think you can, but I think this one's come
up. The
Falkland
Islands, for example.
Eh?
No, the Falkland Islands. I don't think actually. Now you're asking. Someone did a talk once, didn't they, on the Falkland Islands? And
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain. You just apply for a license. I don't think it's a test. Is that? Oh, now I could be wrong on this one. I'm not sure there's actually even a test for the Falklands. I think you had to apply for a license.
Yeah.
But this is the sort of thing that could come into this page at the RSGB, all this licensing abroad and, all that kind of reference documents be the CEPT documents rather than the Ofcom documents, perhaps, or in addition to. Yeah, so these guidance resources, that question about can I operate in that country, A, for 3 months without having to get a separate license, or B, by applying, and if so, where do I apply to? All that would be very useful on this page at the RSGB website.
I agree, and I think in many ways this is a really, really good start. Yeah, right around the world there are different rules and regulations, and Chris and I have got US licenses the same as Dan. And I remember when I was doing my US license, I'm thinking, why is this and why is that? But you kind of learn that, and then the one that the big gotcha at the end for us, or for me anyway, is I got this license and I haven't been over the States and I can't use it because I can only use it on US territory, which I assume other countries would do the similar sort of thing.
Martin, what you could do is if you accessed a remote station in the US, you could use it. So if you access a station via the internet, the station's actually in the US.
Yeah, but Dan will make me do CW then.
No, you can do anything you want. You can do JT9 if you want.
Yeah, you can do anything you want from Dan's station, just not CB.
Good buddy. Yeah. No. We don't pick on the CBers. They're
No,
good
not
people. They're good people. They'll behave yourself, Martin. But no.
You can do that from Bill's station. It's fine.
Yeah. But no, I think it's a good start. And as you said, if we put the CPT regulations there, it would be even better. But lots of times these things have to start somewhere, and I think it's a very good start on that one. Moving on, I came across a magazine, the GEO Quarterly Magazine, and on the internet. Downloaded it. There's some phenomenal pictures from satellite pictures, and some technical articles in there. And you can actually go ahead and download the current episode. They're stopping sending them out as of now, but the archive's available. Ed, what do you think on this one?
Yeah, it looks like a very interesting magazine. Unfortunately, as you've said, they've actually stopping production of the magazine. They want the subscribers to probably go to the Yahoo group instead, so they can continue exchanging information between each other. But the actual magazine itself, from what the website says, they've decided to stop producing. But the complete archive is there to look through, and a very professionally produced PDF-based magazine.
Yeah. As I say, I think it would have been a very expensive magazine to produce with all the full colours. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
I think this is great. I'm going to actually download this myself. I've always had an interest in doing this, and like a lot of projects, I've never gotten around to it. But with all this information online, I should be able to do it no problem.
Yeah. As I was saying, I mean, what blew me away was some of the photographs from space. They're really impressive. Martin, yourself?
I'll be honest, I've not had a chance to look at this magazine because I've only glanced at it very briefly this evening. It looks very interesting, the stuff that it covers, and I'm certainly going to go and have a look at some. If the back catalogue's available online, I'm certainly going to go and have a look at it. It talks about enabling amateur reception of weather and Earth imaging satellites. Amateur reception as opposed to downloading the images from the internet. It's an interesting subject, but I wonder how legal this is, because aren't we only allowed to receive effectively broadcast services, amateur services,
and public service ones as well? These may be classed as public service.
Okay, so if they're classed as public service, great. But I'm just curious as to, are we allowed to promote this?
Yeah.
But no, I'll certainly be having a look at this, and be interesting if there's something on there to give it a go. Yeah, why not? If we're allowed to do it.
Yeah. Now you know
it's legal here in the U.S. and you have U.S. listeners too. So
there you go.
Okay.
There you go. And you know why you were.
There's your use for your W9 license, Martin.
Yeah. Well, you know why you were doing that. Chris was frantically Googling to see if it was legal in the UK. So.
I'm not Googling, just actually look at the magazine actually now.
All right, Chris, over to you.
Looks, as you were saying, Martin, it looks like it's really high quality. And obviously they spent a lot of time putting this together over the years. A bit of a shame that they're stopping producing it going forward. But the website does have loads of back copies there of previous. Is an archive of all the previous. Certainly a good chunk of the previous editions. So yeah, well worth a look. And it's very high quality. It's a bit of a shame they're stopping doing it.
Yeah. So shame we found out about it right at the very end, but. As I say, a lot of information there. If you are interested in this sort of thing, join the Yahoo group, because there will be more information coming their way as well, and we'll put details in the show notes.
The website is www.geo-web.org.uk, and there's a link on there for the back catalogue.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, moving on. We've kind of mentioned this before, but I'm rerunning the story effectively because there's some serious numbers in this, and it talks about Norway is ending national FM or frequency modulated broadcasts to users, and the state-run radios are going over to DAB. But we're talking about sort of numbers like a loss of 21%. That's a fifth. 1 in 5 users disappearing. Martin, this is your area of expertise.
This is foolish, to say the least. His big boss is looking at numbers. making ill-informed decisions. Radio, you have to look at it. Radio broadcasting, you and I may tune into it to listen to it, to be entertained. The whole point of a radio station is broadcasting adverts. But people aren't going to listen to the adverts unless there's something in between the adverts that they can enjoy. So radio itself is a business. If you turn off transmitters, you lose audience. If you lose audience, you can't sell your adverts for as much money. You lose business, people lose jobs. I can't see the benefit in doing this. DAB, well, we've discussed DAB until it's dead and buried. It's like mini discs. It's a nice idea, poorly executed, too little, too late. No, that's unfair to mini discs. But to be honest with you, can't see it being a good thing. The future of radio, is it going to your online streaming services? Or as 4G services come in, as the smart speakers come in, you can ask your favourite smart speaker to play your favourite radio station. It will. Is that going to help? I don't know. But I certainly think that switching off FM is certainly not a good idea.
So in the UK, we haven't exactly had the greatest experience of DAB. But over there in Germany, Ed, you say things are a bit better.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just reading this article, by the way. I think we're talking about the national broadcaster here in Norway. Would they be allowed to have adverts if they're paid for through the tax and everything?
Still a business. It's still providing a service, isn't it?
Radio users complain about the cost of buying new receivers. And the last statement here says other countries, including Switzerland, Britain and Denmark, are due to follow suit in coming years. The way I look at this, the justification for going to DAB over normal FM, VHF FM, the only one I can see is the accountants. So the accountants are coming along saying it's costing you to put 12 stations on, it's costing you 12 transmitters, 12 real estate costs, 12 transmitter costs, etc. Oh, put up a DAB station, you can run 12 stations on one transmitter. Look, we can save a lot of money. The fact that the quality is then not as good, the fact that the range is not as good, and the fact that for the public to be able to receive it, they have to go out and buy new receivers, seems to miss the accountant's eyes, I think. And that's the only reason I can see for people changing to DAB from standard FM, VHF FM broadcasting.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you don't suffer the DAB, do you? Over there in the States, you have HD radio, which is a lot better, I believe.
I tell you the truth, I've never listened to HD radio. But, we don't have DAB here. And I think maybe this is just sort of another indication of how broadcasting, period, is just slowly slipping away.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
I mean, I listen to a lot, even local FM. Even if I have a local FM station, I listen to it via the internet now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So sort of DAB and some of these digital technologies seem like a kind of interim solution. So, obviously we've been using analog radio for many years, AM and now FM, and for many years. And it just seems like DAB's come in just at a time when the internet is, taking off. We can now get, as Martin was saying earlier, mobile devices that can connect to the internet and stream services, and very minimal cost for the broadcaster to do that. But for me, DAB doesn't seem to be particularly in the interest of the consumer. We hear lots of adverts on the radio here in the UK to say, get a DAB radio, but really there aren't many benefits. Okay, there are a few more stations that you can pick up on DAB that you can't get perhaps on FM, but not that many. And like you said, the quality is not so good. The reception to me, I've got a DAB radio, doesn't seem to be quite as good. I think it's going to be, I don't think it's got a very long life. I think the internet's going to take over. That's where the future will be. So we'll move away perhaps from FM, but it'll move more to internet type services.
Yeah.
The future is also podcasting as well. So online streaming, podcasting. It's going to open the door for a lot more things. It's sad that it's killing the radio industry to do it, but it's what's happening, unfortunately.
And it's radio, and it's even TV. So you've now got Netflix and Amazon Video, etc.
Exactly, and you can stream it all. The sad thing is that you can get a better stream. Like if I want to listen to my local commercial station, I can listen to it on FM, and I'm just on the fringe of the FM transmitter, but I can hear it on FM. in okay quality. I can hear it on DAB just with really, really bad quality, and it sort of goes in and out. Or I can stream it via my smart speaker or via my computer at a much higher bit rate. So even if I did have a strong DAB signal here, I would get a better signal streaming it off the internet. So why would I use a DAB radio?
I suppose the only thing that... Sorry, go on, Ed.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, I mean, you're making references to listening to this radio based on listening to it from your house or your home. Obviously, the other half of the market, or a big piece of the market, is the mobile market.
In the cars, yeah.
The cars. And, of course, if you're in a car driving anywhere where you can get to a cell network, you can get internet access. So, internet radios in cars would make a lot more sense than DAB radios. Now in Germany, new cars are all being fitted with DAB radios. To put it this way, it's an option anyway, because, of course, generally your car comes without a radio and then you decide what option to add, but they're being pushed like anybody's business. And DAB's, okay, it's DAB Plus now, but the predecessor DAB started, was it 15 years ago? And hasn't been accepted fully yet. So, and I think when we started talking about DAB on this podcast a couple of years back, my comment was also, you've got internet radio. What do you need DAB for? It doesn't give you any advantages over that. And your internet radio is going to give that accountant even bigger savings from his budget.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, when you're streaming as well, you're walking around with a phone in your pocket. Okay, it's coming out your data allowance, but most of us have got more data than we'll ever know what to do with on our phones. It's the mobile phone companies effectively paying to run the transmitters. All you've got to do as a radio station is put the signal into the internet. I stream it on my phone. If I go from one transmitter to the next, to another, if I go into a shopping centre, chances are the transmitter, there's a cell site within the shopping centre as well. You stay in coverage. With DAB with a pocket radio, you can't do that. Years ago, I had a Walkman in my pocket, and I listened to my local commercial station, and then when you went inside, you just go fuzzy. But now, I go on the train to London, I hear it all the way.
And a lot of the cell phone companies are actually saying you can stream the music or the radio stations, the podcasts or whatever, for free. It doesn't come from your data allowance now. So, they're definitely promoting it in that way. And
because they've got something that DAB hasn't.
Having said that, one of the TV adverts in Germany is for an application called, I think it's Deezer or something, saying you can download the music to your smartphone and play it. You don't have to be online to do it. And I'm going, but surely everybody's online all the time now anyway. But in any case, justification for putting DAB into a new country, a new site, I don't see the justification when you compare it against internet radio.
Right.
Internet radio
doesn't make sense
get a radio
financially.
station from your hometown, from your home country, from a guy that's running a radio station in his bedroom that happens to play the kind of music that you like. Whatever it is, it's so much easier with internet radio, isn't it?
Hey, Martin.
Hello.
You just convinced me to put Hobby Tech Radio.
You are not doing that again, Martin. It nearly killed you. Chris, back me up.
Don't, Martin. You were not a well man after that, no. You were very, very tired all the time.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who are trying to work out what we're on about, I did try running an internet radio station for 6 months, 24/7 for 6 months, and the sheer work, it was more than one person. It was...
but only because you wouldn't hire any more DJs and you insisted on doing a 6 month shift on your own.
Yeah, it's true. No.
Sorry.
No, it was, as the name mentions, Hobby Tech. It was technical articles. Effectively, it was podcasts. A number of different people. We run their podcasts, but hey, we didn't get a big enough audience, so and then it nearly killed me in the amount of work I was doing on it. So, but I still think it's a good idea. To the internet streaming will be the way it goes. And I agree with all the boys on that one. Moving on, distracted driving in Ontario. They were originally talking about the ban coming in, so for two-way radios. But, this is only for the Ontario. Dan, you're nearest. What do you think?
Well, I just did a little bit of Googling myself on what our situation here in Michigan is. And Oddly enough, I blogged about this just about a year ago, and I completely slipped my mind. And at the time here in Michigan, we had a similar thing where they were going to try and put through a bill that would not exempt amateur radio. And apparently that bill didn't go through, and it was supposed to be reintroduced in 2017. So I don't really know. But, like we were talking about before, being able to operate hands-free would be a great thing. And we might, somebody might, the ARRL, whoever, might actually want to push that.
Yeah.
Just to be safer, make amateur radio safer.
Well, it is it's safer and more enjoyable. When we talk about hands-free, often we're talking about a boom mic and an external PTT switch, often located somewhere around the gear shift. And that's, I think, the way most of us do it. But, Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, as I don't operate mobile over here, I can't really comment. I have operated in the past when I was in Australia, for example, using a hand mic, but I had an automatic car then. I now have a manual car. I think I would probably have a bit of difficulty operating because I can guarantee somebody had passed the over back to me just as I was coming up to a roundabout and I need to change gears and steer around the roundabout. With the obvious result that either I don't come back to the person talking or I try to and then end up dropping the mic somewhere. So, but I would say on this thing about coming back to Ontario is I do know that different provinces in Canada have different rules, and I believe the federal rules are also different as well. So it's a little unclear across the board in Canada as to what the regulations are. So obviously the amateurs over there, when they travel from province to province, they'd have to make sure that they were within the law.
Right. Well, talking to somebody who, when I used to drive with a fist mic, always used to pass it back to me as a roundabout about half a mile from my house. And I'd be in conversation with Mr. Howard on the way home, wouldn't I, Chris? And
yes.
You'd always pass it back to me. I don't know how you managed it, but I was always approaching this roundabout, and Chris would pass it back to me and say, over to you. So what do you think? Hands-free's got to be the way, isn't it?
Well, I agree. I don't know if there's been any research into this subject. I know there has been probably around mobile phones and holding a phone to your ear where you're having a two-way conversation with somebody else who's not in the car with you, so they're not really aware of what's going on and what you're doing. And obviously, there's been lots of laws around the world around using a phone, and I think quite rightly now that's not allowed, certainly in this country anyway, without your hands-free. I think with my personal view, and again, I've not done any research on this, so I could be wrong, but I think exactly what Ed was saying. If you're driving along, you've got to change gear in a manual car, you need two hands. You're driving along kind of, normal sort of streets, housing estates, that sort of thing. You're having to change gear quite a lot. Trying to do that with the fist mic, you're sort of having to juggle the steering wheel, the microphone, the gear stick, and it's probably not very safe. I think it's very different if you're driving along the highway, along the motorway, and you're in top gear and you're just driving the straight roads. I think actually then using a fist mic is actually, in my opinion, reasonably safe. But I think if you're in it really depends a lot on the situation. But I think it needs some research. I think it needs to go out and actually do some study on this and find out actually is it or isn't it dangerous. Obviously, there's a lot of people that do use two-way radio, not as a hobby like we do, but as part of the job. The police, I'm sure that the emergency services, taxi drivers, bus drivers that use this sort of technology as well as amateurs. They use it in a different way. We tend to have quite long overs as amateurs, whereas maybe a taxi driver might just get a quick call saying, "Can you go to this address, please, and pick somebody up?" So it might be different. So I think it might need a bit of research and figure out actually is it safe, is it unsafe, and I think that would probably answer the question.
Yeah. It's an interesting subject. Mime, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to know what the driving force is for this. Why has this suddenly come to fruition at the moment? Why has it come to the forefront of things? Now, I don't condone driving with any handheld device. If you're going to do it, use a speaker mic. As say, we did a feature on it. You did a feature a while ago. Create a hands-free mic. I've always used a hands-free mic. I found it a lot easier. Some time ago, I actually got pulled over. It was quite a while back now, but I got pulled over for answering a call at traffic lights, and it was a 2-second call. Yeah, I'm 30 seconds away, and I got pulled over, and I got told off for it. And fortunately, the policeman let me off and said, "Go get a hands-free kit." And since that day, I've never done that with my phone. From the point of view of radio, again, I've got a hands-free kit in the car. I use that, but I will put this one argument to you that no one has ever seemed to have done anything about. If you're on the phone when you are driving, you can drop it if there is a problem. I'm not saying it's safe to do it, but you can drop it. If you're using a radio or a handheld microphone when you are driving and there's a problem, you can drop it. If you are smoking a lit cigarette and the window is closed, you are not going to drop it. If the end of your cigarette drops off on your lap, you are more concerned about what it's landed on than where you are driving. Why is that still legal?
Yeah.
I don't understand this, but yeah, it's an odd one for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And, well, I think we're going to let the users in on our pre-show discussion. And Dan, I was talking about the guy who taught me amateur radio, used to do CW on the mobile. And I mean, I asked you if you did it and you said no, but comments on it.
Oh yeah, so I've worked lots of guys doing CW mobile, and I'm always amazed, just amazed.
Yeah, I think
some of these guys are even doing it on the freeway, going 65 miles an hour.
Yeah,
more.
Well, that's probably safer than sort of in town, really, because you sort of set yourself in a lane in cruise mode. But it's an interesting one. I mean, it's not. Well, I have enough trouble trying to do the very slow morse that Chris and I do with the children on HMS Belfast, but doing it mobile, that would do my head in totally.
One thing I found interesting is that some of the newer rigs that have come out from the big companies have Bluetooth interface exactly for this kind of hands-free operation, but I'm not sure how they do the PTT unless they rely on Vox. But Vox within a car, with all the noises you have, is probably not a good idea. But it'd be interesting if any of the listeners use their rigs using Bluetooth, using the built into the car hands-free kit or whatever. How do you do your PTT? Hopefully you don't have to reach down and press the button on the rig, 'cause that'd be worse than not having the hands-free.
I think it's done Vox Ed, and I think that the only sensible way of doing it with a Bluetooth adapter is to have a noise-cancelling one. So it doesn't just pick up all the background noise and go into transmit. Because it's noise cancelling, it ignores the background noise and it only picks you up. I bought at a rally a Bluetooth adapter to go into fit to pretty much any radio, and I've never used it because I'm not a big fan of Bluetooth, but I was just interested of what was in it, and there's not a lot in it, but I think that's how it does it, or certainly how the one that I got did it. No, I haven't got a Bluetooth headset, so it isn't going to get used. So that's that one. Moving on, I thought this was interesting, and it got me a little bit. The sun is dimming as our solar minimum approaches. Now that could be an instant panic. I'm not suggesting it will, but NASA are doing some work on this. Martin, do you want to go first on this one?
Is it getting darker? Is it getting colder? I don't know. The fact we're approaching a minimum, I can only look on the positive side, saying once we get to it, it's the same as when we have the shortest day. I look on the positive side, the days are therefore getting longer. The fact we're approaching the solar minimum, therefore we will soon be on our way back up, and the HF conditions will be coming back up again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say it's. I'm looking forward to having an HF maximum again, the sunspot maximum again. I must admit.
When was the last maximum we had?
A few years ago now.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. Ed, do you remember?
I actually heard it on a podcast today. I'm trying to remember what they said. It wasn't that long ago. 2012.
Yeah, this was a bad one, wasn't it?
But the maximum was only 140 something or 150. Yeah, and the next one is only going to expect it to be that. We're around 70 now. We're in the low 70s. And back in, I think, September of 2017, it got down to the absolute technically minimum sunspot value of 66. I think it's 66. So basically, we've already hit the absolute, can't go any lower minimum, but we're not coming up. We're still going down. Apparently, we're going to stay in the doldrums until 2020 and then see it come up. But the fact that the NASA are actually putting up some equipment up the International Space Station to check how much the sun is dimming is interesting. They obviously think that there may be a relationship with the sunspot cycle. However, that being said, as there are less sunspots at the moment than there were this time last year, and it's actually at the moment a milder winter, that would actually go against that idea.
Yeah, well, that was what I thought when I was speaking to you on it. Dan, you reckon that you're doing okay on 80 and 40, and that's probably the best bands at the moment, isn't it?
Right, and if I could get on 160, that'd be great too. The noises are higher on 160. My question is that this news says there's a slight a drop in solar irradiance. Well, how slight is slight? Is it just measurable and doesn't really have much of a practical effect, or is it slight enough to actually affect the climate here?
Yeah,
I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to find out.
Yeah, well, I suppose slight's a bit more vague than a gnat's wings width, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chris, any thoughts on it?
Well, I assume it means that they've been able to detect it at least. I mean, ultimately, the sun is going to eventually, hopefully, not for quite a while now, not for quite a while yet, it will eventually burn out, I believe. So, I think, as Dan was saying, just how small a measurement is that? The question on the solar cycles, the last maximum was actually 2014, looking at the charts on the internet, but it wasn't that high a maximum. It was actually not that spectacular. The best one recently, looking here, was solar cycle 22, and we're currently in 24. 22 back in 1990 was quite a large maximum, and then and then there was one back in again around about the early 2000s, which was not quite as high as the one in 1990, and then the recent one in 2014, cycle 24, was being really not much to write home about, and it does seem to suggest that it's going to continue going down until around about 2020, when hopefully things will start to improve again. But let's hope the next maximum is going to be a better one.
No, it won't be.
Okay.
They've already said that. Well, the prediction is that it will be worse than 2014.
Oh dear. Okay.
So things are flattening out effectively, if you look at it over a period of time.
But at least there's lots of new technologies like from Joe Taylor and his weak signals and Whisper and FT8 and things like that are probably compensating our interest.
And satellites, and dare I say it, things like Fusion and D-Star and DMR, and there's always lots of things to play with in amateur radio, so let's not despair.
Yeah.
And don't forget better receivers.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it was, 2 years ago, not even that, 18 months ago, I worked with a simple dipole and 5 watts of SSB from Germany to Australia. More than once. So that was already with the sun cycle going down. So everybody's saying, it's not possible. You need 20 kilowatts and you need a blooming enormous antenna farm. With a decent receiver and a decent operator, no, you don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with you on that. And equally, a band is only dead because often we think it's dead. If you call, often there's loads of people listening and very few people calling. And often you can get a bit of a pile-up going if you actually call. So that's another one that I think all five of us would agree on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the predictions are at the average. So the average is it's not very good, but within that not very good, you can have a couple of hours of okay.
Yeah, or superb.
Or superb, yeah.
Yeah. Right. moving on, we've had lots of stories about broadcasters shutting down stations, and that annoys me a little bit because we're losing lots of shortwave broadcast stations and that sort of thing, and even our medium wave stations are shutting down. So just a little bit annoying. But in Australia, they've got a new station. 4KZ is now on shortwave. It's on 5.055 kilohertz in AM mode, and it's well, to me, there's two nice things about this. One, it's another shortwave station going on the air instead of coming off, and two, it's very close to 60 metres, or our 60 metre band, or what would be potentially a 60 metre band in Australia. And at least you'll be able to do some propagation checks on this, because looking at it, they're running a kilowatt, which is not a phenomenal amount more than amateurs can run. Ed, you've got more experience of Australia than the rest of us, so do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the background to the story first of all. January 2017, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, or Corporation, sorry, not Commission, Corporation, the national paid for by the taxpayer broadcaster, closed down its shortwave transmissions in the 15 megahertz broadcast band. And these transmissions used to cover the top end of Australia, so top end of Queensland, a bit of Northern Territory. And this was such a surprise to some people, and it caused quite a furore. And Nick Xenophon, that's his name, Nick, one of the MPs in Parliament, brought it up in Parliament and said, what's going on here? Because there's now areas of the outback that don't get satellite, don't get internet, don't get your FM broadcasts, that won't be able to receive any emergency radio or any radio of any kind. And despite all of that, the ABC still went ahead and closed down the service, or they had closed it down, they didn't bring it back. And yeah, politically that was a rather negative impression of the ABC, which otherwise is actually a very good company. Now what's happened is that a commercial radio station who already was in North Queensland, called NQ Radio, North Queensland Radio, already has several, 3 or 4 stations on AM and FM bands, have now set up a transmitter on shortwave on around 5 megahertz there, feeding it with the same content feed it does for its AM station, and it's running about 500 watts at the moment. The transmitter that came in from the US had a fault on it, but once that's fixed, it should be up to the 1,000 watts, and it's running that into an inverted V dipole, and covering quite nicely North Queensland and into Northern Territory, but also receiving SWL reports from the north of New South Wales, also from Canada and California in the US. So, as we know with propagation, and 60 meters is a nice band for propagation at the moment, despite the low sunspots. The other piece on this is the fact that the gentleman that's the general manager of NQ Radio, who's set all this up, is actually Al Curtin, and he's a radio amateur of EK4 Fox Kilo Zulu. So it's nice to know there's an amateur in there going in, and they now have a service into areas of the outback, so that if any warnings for bad weather coming or other dangers are coming, those people out in the trucks in the middle of nowhere, most of which who have HF radios in them, can now listen to 4KZ to get their news updates now that the ABC is gone.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to you, Ed, and suddenly became aware of the call sign, because it's in front of me, but I hadn't really paid attention. But that's a foundation call sign in Australia, isn't it? And yep. It's good on him to put it on. The sound. I mean, obviously he's into amateur radio as well as broadcast.
Yeah, he's a professional broadcaster, and it's a commercial station that's doing this. There's profit to be made here. But it's just quite often you'll find in the broadcasting industry there are amateur radio enthusiasts involved as well.
Yeah. Dan, over there in the States, I mean, would you be able to receive, this was a skip just wrong for you, because, I mean, they're talking about California getting a bit hearing it, but I wondered if you would.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't unless conditions were really good.
Yeah?
But I'll have a listen.
Yeah. I mean, Ed often sends me things that says Radio Caroline's transmitting, and I never hear it here. But my HF at home is pretty poor, but I mean,
I do hear reports of people working VK stations on 40 meters in the morning, for example. So maybe if I tune in real early in the morning, I can hear it.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility, isn't it? Because it's not that far away from 7 megs, is it? So it's a possibility. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good that we've got a station on the shortwave. It's almost the opposite story to what we had on the earlier, talking about the FM stations being shut down. So yeah, I think it's good. I think Ed was saying that earlier that a lot of, in certain parts of Australia, they haven't got internet, they haven't got other alternatives. So I think it's good that we've got this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let me just throw in a little mention here. In the U.S. here, we've got this shortwave station, WTWW. And it's run by a ham, WABAPUM, guy named Ted Randall.
Yeah.
And he actually runs a lot of amateur radio shows on there. He broadcasts the Ham Nation audio live when they tape it. And I've actually appeared on his station once or twice. And he's actually running lots of power. He's running like tens of thousands of watts, if not hundreds of thousands of watts.
Yeah.
And he seems to be making a business of it, so maybe that's a little trend.
Yeah, I used to listen to Ted Randall's broadcasts. They used to listen to the podcasts, and then he kind of stopped doing them, or I couldn't find them. But they're quite interesting. Ted Randall's quite an interesting guy to listen to.
WTWW 5083 kilohertz.
Right.
Yeah, now I'll jump in on the European side. We've got something very similar called Channel 292 on 6070 that is 10 kilowatts out of a station near Ingolstadt, owned and run by a radio amateur. They took over the license for the frequency from Deutsche Welle, and they also retransmit each week the DARC news broadcast and other amateur radio related programs, and a lot of music like ex-pirate radio style stuff as well. So it seems to be a trend that either communities or amateur radio people are getting involved and taking over as the national broadcasters close down these various frequencies.
Yeah. Well, if we wanted to be kind of in the vogue with all of them, I'm going to pass it to mine in a minute, and I can see on his camera he's got a smile on his face, and he knows what I'm going to do to him. But we could get Martin to read the traffic report.
You can do that if you want them, and that goes out across the UK, but that's on all sorts of different radio stations. But you don't want the traffic right now. With reference to the Australian broadcaster, though, 4KZ, now being on shortwave, well, we mentioned earlier, while some are switching off FM, Australia moving stuff to shortwave. I like this. Remember, it's huge. Try and cover that with your precious DAB. People in the outback clearly rely on this kind of service. Clearly there's demand for it, for 4KZ to be paying to put this system in, for them to pay to run it. Obviously, there's a cost of the transmitter to purchase it, to install it. The real estate he's obviously already got. If he's going to be running a kilowatt, we can work out the kind of power he's going to have to pay for every single day. Good on him. Good on the amateurs behind this for recognising what you can do with shortwave. And shame on ABC for shutting down a critical service in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. And I am sure at some point in time we'll have a big sign up saying Martin hates DAB.
I'm not sure a sign's required, is it really? Let's be honest.
In fairness, I'm not the only one. Let's get Leslie on here. I'm sure he'll join in with me on that one.
Yeah, I spoke to Leslie earlier today. He's doing fine. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. But no problems on that. Well, it's nice to see a broadcast using the shortwave bands again. And I say, maybe you don't need to run 100 kilowatts to make a difference.
Well, 500 watts and being heard in California is pretty good.
Yeah, precisely. So there you go. Last news story, and this was kind of nice because it was the first transatlantic contact between the UK and the US on 472 kilohertz. And the two gentlemen involved, Dave Bowman, G0 MRF, who Chris tells me we have met, and I remembered afterwards, and Dave Riley, AA1A. To me, you know, what a good one. They did it with JT9. What a lot of kilometres, 5,160 kilometres, a phenomenal distance for 60 watts. So, Dan, we come across to your side of the pond. What do you think?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, let's show some activity on the bands, and I think it's great. It should be a lot of fun. I'm sure those guys had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any immediate plans to go on these sort of frequencies because I don't have the real estate myself to put the mega antenna and the massive loading coils up.
Well, I was going to say, so looking at the article, so we do know David Bowman, who did a talk for Martin a couple of years ago on satellites, and he's a clever guy. He was involved in the FunQ project. So he designed parts of the satellite for that. So he's obviously got quite a wide range of interests because obviously that's quite high frequencies, and this is obviously very low frequency. So, he talks about running 60 watts, so not a huge amount of power either. So, done pretty well there. So the area was 250 foot of wire in an inverted L. So not a massive, quite big, but it could have been a lot bigger. But, you know, I think the frequency was I've forgotten now, but you know, quite a long wavelength.
630 meters.
Yeah, pretty. You know, you wouldn't get a half wave unless you got a massive farm or something. But done very well, and very interesting.
Yeah, Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I wonder who's going to be the first to do it on 2200 meters, which is the other new band that we've got both sides of the pond. And that really would be something. Antenna size is the limiting factor for most of us here. We've talked about this before the recording, and as I said, in most cases it's like a plastic dustbin with lots of wire wound around it, or something the equivalent of that, and then a long vertical wire or a horizontal wire or whatever. So even though that transmitter or the amplifier might have been putting out 60 watts on 472 kilohertz, the antenna ERP would be a negative, I expect. So the actual radiated power could have been a lot less than 60 watts. You know, maybe it was 0.6 watt effective radiated power. Just shows what you can do with the JT9 mode, of course. Be nice to see this done with sideband or AM or something, but that I think would be dreaming. We'd need fantastic antennas and a lot more power.
Yes. It's also interesting, actually, that they've chosen to, or certainly David at the UK end, used an ICOM 7300, which is a software-defined radio, and it says modified. I wonder how that works. I wonder if it was actually a software change, or whether it was a physical, transverter or something that was used to get onto that frequency.
I think the receiver goes down. The receiver will go down to 630 meters, because I have a 7300, but the transmitter doesn't. So he would have used a transverter of some kind to convert the transmit output down.
Does something clever with software, or unless of course they managed to hack the firmware or something, and maybe make it work on a.
I don't believe so, because he said he also added a filtered preamp on a 60 watt amplifier, so it's like a transverter kind of setup is used.
Yeah, okay.
And what was used it doesn't say what was used at the US side, unfortunately, but Oh, actually, was this only a one-way contact, not two-way?
No, it would have been a two-way, as it says contact. It doesn't say a broadcast, it says a contact, so it would have been a two-way.
Right. So it would be interesting to know what was at the other end as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I don't think mine and I will be doing this fairly soon. I mean, we could probably string 630 metres of wire between our houses.
Between the two of us, yeah. Well, we were talking about ATV, weren't we? But that was up about 23 centimetres. At the risk of sounding cheeky, 5,160 kilometres distance between the two stations. It's almost as long as the antenna you need to use this kind of band, isn't it? But no, this I like this. It's JT9. Okay, it's a low signal mode, but it's a really good achievement to get that kind of distance. Now you've done it though, what's next? I'd love to see someone do this kind of thing with voice, but as we mentioned, I think that we might need a lot more power to be able to do anything like that.
Yeah. But a nice story to finish up on. Amateurs, pushing the boundaries out just that little bit further. And say, in my opinions, a nice story to finish up on. Right, what then normally comes is I have a wander around the table asking the guys what you've been up to since we've last recorded a podcast. Ed, what have you been up to since our last podcast?
Radio-wise, very little indeed, because of Christmas and the New Year, and I had the pleasure of my brother coming over to stay for Christmas.
Oh, that's good.
And we went and did a lot of touristy things, visiting Christmas markets and Baroque churches and mountains with snow on them, etc., etc. So that was quite nice. From the radio side of things, nothing particular.
All right. But the New Year's here, like the rest of us, and I think we'll be out soon.
Yeah, well, New Year means I can start and reactivate all the summits that I activated last year and get the points for them again.
That sounds good to me. Dan, you said you had a big family gathering over Christmas. Did you get much radio done at all?
Oh, yeah, I still did quite a fair amount. I've been enjoying my IC 7300, and we did straight key night. I don't know if you do that over there, but the night of New Year's Eve and then now through the New Year's Day, we do what's called straight key night, where you're supposed to use some kind of mechanical key, no electronic keyers. And the one thing about straight key night that I like, it reminds me why I do use a paddle and keyer. Man, oh man, that's hard on the arm. But it's kind of fun.
Yeah. I think there are various contests and bits and pieces happen over the Christmas period over here, and the GQRP Club do some, not a contest as such, but some operating events. But unfortunately, I was a bit tied up over Christmas. Chris, any thoughts on what you've been up to?
I've not done an awful lot. A little bit of operating HF, not a huge amount. I've actually had a problem with the rig, or not the rig, sorry, with my station on 40 and 80 metres I need to get to the bottom of. Suddenly I seem to be getting breakthrough when I transmit on those frequencies, so I need to do a bit of work. I think we've chatted before we started recording about perhaps it's the feeder or something, so I might have to take things down. And it's been able to do it for 5 years now. It probably needs a little bit of maintenance perhaps. So yeah, I'll take it down and have a look at that and sort it out. But so not been a huge amount recently. We are planning again to go to HMS Belfast, I think, in a couple of weeks' time, Martin. So we'll that's coming up. But no, nothing too much planned. We do need to get on satellites. I know we keep saying this. So I did build that aerial at least 6 weeks ago now. I've not actually used it yet. So we do need to. It's been a little bit cold and windy and wet over here at the moment. But once things start to improve, I think we need to get out there and tick the box to say we've actually done the satellite contacts.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw another spanner in the works for you, because I think your brother got you a really, really good Christmas present. It wasn't radio related as such, but I think it was very well thought out.
He bought me an Airfix HMS Belfast kit to put together. Which is still sat in the box, but I will actually do that at some point. To go and get some glue and things and paint, I suppose. I didn't even open the box yet. I'm not sure what's in there, but yeah, I will put that together. It looks like it will take a bit of careful, steady hand to put it together, but I'll give that a try.
Yeah, you'll find if you want to make your life easy, go to a model shop and get liquid glue rather than the stuff that comes in tubes, because the stuff that comes in tubes is just unusable, and nobody who makes models uses the stuff that comes in tubes.
Polystyrene cement, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's a lot better stuff to use, Chris. Martin, what have you been up to, apart from trying to make your electric meter go round at 500 mile an hour?
Just noise generators. They're called fairy lights. No, most of them have come down today, actually. We took the ones in the house down, but the ones on the outside of the house have to come down fairly soon. Well, while HF has been on a bit of a low, I've been playing with Fusion on CQ UK and also on D-Star. So we're still been using the radio a little bit. I had to install another wireless access point in my house to cover the kitchen. I got one of the smart speakers for Christmas. I can't say its name because if I do say its name, it will probably wake up everybody's smart speaker that might be nearby. Let's just call her She That Shall Not Be Named. But I got one of those for Christmas, which I was really excited about. I put it in the kitchen and it didn't have very good coverage. So I've installed another Wi-Fi access point to cover my kitchen. Really excited about that. And so I've got an amplifier and a set of speakers to install in the kitchen with it as well. So online radio streaming will be used a lot more in the kitchen.
Alexa, play ICQ podcast.
Okay, Google. Yeah, wake everyone's one up. Yeah. No, but you're right. It is an Alexa device for obvious reasons. And the other thing I've noticed as well, slightly not as much what I've been doing, but we were watching a Netflix series called The Crown, which is on there at the moment, and a lot of it is based on the royal family and being set on HMS Britannia. And there's a scene in that where they run from one of the places on HMS Britannia, which is, by the way, in Edinburgh, into the wireless office, which magically turns into the HMS Belfast wireless office, where we sit and like, hang on, is that Martin's flask in the background? No, it's not. And then they run back to the set, which is back in Edinburgh. So there's quite a bit of content from that is filmed on HMS Belfast, even walking down some of the corridors. So I knew that they shut the boat for a little while last year to do some filming. I think I found what it is. It's The Crown on Netflix, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, right. That sounds good. That sounds really good. Well, like you, Martin, because you didn't mention you've had a new job for about a month, 6 weeks, is it?
I joined at the beginning of November.
All right. So a couple of months. I got a new job, which means that I'm not going to be half dead recording these episodes. And I've done a complete career change. Well, it's not a career change at my time of life, but a complete job change, which is really strange because, I was going to fix something at work today. And I'm working in a nursing home and in maintenance, and the lady who's the care home manager got into a real panic when I said, is it okay if I solder a couple of leads back? I'm going to fix one of these nurse call buttons. And, oh no, you can't do that. And I said, well, you're going to pay £50 and all I've got to do is solder 2 wires back on the switch, which have been pulled out, but that's what it's going to be. Anyway, enough of my whinging. New job for me, so hopefully I'll be more awake. Have been playing a lot with my SDR radio and a little bit with the FunCube dongle, so done a lot of really just listening is what I've been up to mainly, and a little bit playing with the Arduino. Done a restarted to play with the Arduino a bit more, got the second Arduino book from the ARRL for Christmas, so that was quite good. And Colin actually rang me up over Christmas and decided he was going to play with his Arduino and got it out and started doing things, and it didn't work. I think I know what he did wrong hardware-wise, although he won't admit to any of it. But the downside was that the piece of software was actually wrong as well, which came with the device. So you had to modify to get it to work. But that was fun. And you guys talking about the internet speaker, let's call it the internet speaker and not wake everyone up. We had an email from Gavin, and I'm trying to remember Gavin's call sign from the cam house.
BXF.
M1 BXF, you said?
That's Gavin, yeah.
Yeah. Nice guy, member of the Cambridge Hams group. He's having trouble getting things to play, the ICQ to play on a device like you've got, Martin. So we were trying to work out, and I was hoping in many ways I was going to get one for Christmas I had said nothing about this, and then got Gavin's email about 3 or 4 days before Christmas, and I thought, be nice if I got one, because then I could have a look and see what the problem was, but I don't have one.
Depends. Now, I'm very much still learning with these devices, and yeah, I've got the Echo. But I think what you have to do, because there was one radio station I wanted to listen to. Now, one of the radio stations that they talk about, they say it runs via TuneIn. And the radio station I wanted to listen to only runs on Radio Player. And so you have to log on to the device, you add a skill, which is effectively you load the Radio Player software onto that device. And then what you do is you say to she who now shall not be named, ask Radio Player to play this radio. And then it will play it. I'm wondering if we're on, because this podcast goes out on multiple services. I think we're on iHeart.
We're on iHeart, yeah.
And maybe there's an iHeart skill that you can add. And if you say, Alexa, ask iHeart to play ICQ podcast, you might find it will do it. It might not find it. I mean, I'll go down and try it, see if it plays, see how it does it.
I've also got one of these devices. I've got an Echo as well, an Echo Dot as well. And it used to work. I used to just be able to play it, just be able to say to it, play ICQ podcast, and it would just play the latest episode. And that seems to have stopped working out. That was doing it through, it would say, play the latest episode of ICQ podcast through TuneIn radio. So I think there's something about maybe the title of the podcast, something that's confusing. It seems to pick up the wrong thing now. So I think we'll perhaps get Colin to look into that.
Are we still on TuneIn? Maybe we can look at what happened at the time that it disappeared.
Maybe, yeah. It could be something to do with it.
It could
we
be
have a problem with our stream.
It could be something as stupid as, and I don't know, but I know we're on so many different streams and bits and pieces that if you was getting it from TuneIn, Chris, and Martin's getting it from iHeartRadio, because we're on so many different streams, maybe the thing needs to be told what stream to go and get it from.
No, I don't think so, because if I now say, Alexa, play ICQ podcast, pause everybody that's got one in the background, it will actually go away and find something that sounds the nearest it can find. Normally it's some South American radio station or something that's nothing at all even sounds like ICQ podcast. So I think it's got something to do with maybe the title or the indexing that's going on within TuneIn. And that's on TuneIn Radio now, and it is on there. So there's obviously something not quite right. There's a little bit of investigation.
Well, I just tried it on OK Google, and
wow.
But I got a list of them. I had to touch the button to select the one I wanted.
Okay. I mean,
and these are all similar things, so you'd think it should work. But I think there is an app that has to be added to the Dot to be able to play podcasts in general. But whether that's standardly there or whether you have to add it, I don't know.
It's a skill I think you add, but I think the short answer is we'll look into it for you, Gavin, and perhaps we'll let you know offline.
Yeah, because I think it's an interesting one, and I know that Colin has done a lot of work trying to get it on as many things as possible. And my only last bitch, and I might have to cut this.
You may as well cut it down, Martin, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
None of that is we're no longer put on the front page of QRZ. Every time I publish any information on QRZ, it drops to an obscure forum, or gets put in an obscure forum about 10 layers deep.
Who have you upset at QRZ?
Well, I don't think I've upset anybody, but there are some podcasts that still make it to the homepage, but it just seems everything Martin, we do.
I was looking on there now. We've still got the one from the Newark video still on there with Dave.
Yeah, but Dave Wilson. That's ancient. That's like been on there nearly well over a month.
Well, it's got 21 comments and it's had 3,470 views.
Yeah, but the problem is that now they're not putting the podcast up on the main page. It means that the main news page is fairly stagnant for a long time. So anyway,
I suggest, Martin, you don't put that on the podcast, to be honest with you.
Not unless I want to pick a fight.
Unless you're feeling naughty. Just on the subject of the Alexa or these internet speakers, I did notice that there's a nice video piece Apple's put together, Hermetics Ham, that talks all about using the Amazon Alexa and Amazon Radio. Worth a watch. So if you're interested, have a look at Pete's website, which is I think it's M0PSX. Do a search for that and you'll find Pete's website and you'll see.
Interestingly enough, it's also on the QRZ.com main page.
Okay.
Alexa Shack Companion, about
Oh, yeah,
three
got
quarters
that.
of the way down.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So
Next
there
to
you
the
go.
video of Martin and below the one that Dan did with Gary Pearce.
Yeah.
It's below the one of RSGB online examinations with Martin.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been quite busy. So last thing for me to do is to thank every and every one of you for helping me tonight with the news stories. Thanks, Ed.
You're very welcome.
And Martin, thank you.
No problem at all. It was great fun.
Yeah. Dan, thanks for
My
tonight.
pleasure as always.
Cheers. And Chris.
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Another good episode.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you again in a couple of episodes' time.
Yeah. 73 all.
M3.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with news in Australia, where a new amateur radio body has been formed, the Radio Amateur Society of Australia, the RASA. The group will listen to the needs and concerns of all amateurs and will make submission to the regulator on their behalf. It's a streamlined organisation focused upon representation. The group will be using modern technology to manage operations and communications with members. Membership is free for the first 12 months and there's no obligation to renew in the second year. The Radio Society of Australia also intend to open lines of communication with as many clubs and amateurs throughout the Australian region as possible to draw on their knowledge and experiences to help the group grow. So we'll put a link to the new group on the ICQ podcast website for anyone who might be interested. In the UK, the British Amateur Radio Television Club ATV repeater GB3UT is being removed from its site at the University of Bath, along with the FM repeaters GB3UB and the APRS Digi repeater GB7UB. GB3UT is located currently in a small building on top of an accommodation block in the University of Bath and was one of the first amateur television repeaters in the UK. It can receive both analogue and digital transmissions. We're expecting further news in relation to the repeater's relocation. And in Germany, good news here that Class E licence holders at the SEPT novice level are now permitted to use bands between 2320 and 2450 MHz and 5650 to 5850 MHz, so 2.3 and 5 GHz bands. The DARC, the German Amateur Radio Regulatory Club body there, note that the new allocations will enable Class E holders to participate in high-speed amateur radio multimedia network Hamnet. The power limit is 5 watts PEP, the same as the existing Class E 10 GHz allocation, and this came into effect immediately, but will be limited until the end of 2018. So we've got news for the announcement on this again on the ICQ podcast website. Well, now we head over to our feature this episode, which is a feature on setting up a second shack. I hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode I wanted to talk about building a second shack. Now you're probably thinking, why would I want a second shack? Well, hopefully I can give you some reasons. For those of you who are just starting off in the hobby, some of the things in this article may be very interesting to you. For some of you who think that you'll never ever need a second shack, also, some of these things may be of use to you at a later date. We tend to change our hobby and the way we work, so hopefully there'll be something in here for everybody. So why would I want to build a second shack? Well, the various reasons are, potentially, holiday use. If I always go to the same place every time and I have a holiday apartment that I own, then potentially a second shack at the holiday apartment makes a lot of sense. Family visits is another one. If you visit parents or brothers, sisters, and they have a nice operating point, you go and see them quite regularly or fairly often, maybe they'll let you leave some equipment with them, and it'll save you dragging your equipment up there to do a little bit of operating while you're visiting on a long visit. Another suggestion also is work shacks. You may or may not be able to, but lunchtimes, why not go on the air? And if you can put a small antenna up and work, if they agree it, why not set up a shack, obviously, so you can operate at lunchtimes? Another operation, well, contest station shack. Well, if you're going down this route, and I'm only going to mention it quickly, if you're going down the contest shack situation, you're going to be really serious into it, and that's outside of the scope I suggest. Maybe a mobile shack. Some of us have caravans, motorhomes, and you may want to think about setting up a shack in that, so that when you're on holiday, you have something already pre-set up and you don't have to strip things out of the main shack before you start. And possibly the last one I can think of is a remote shack. So for argument's sake, if your parents or somebody lives in a nice RF quiet environment, if you could put a radio there and link it to the internet, you would be able to remote operate it and have a quiet shack for a lot of operation in, say, the centre of a city. So that could be an option. Now, but let's be green on this. How many radios do most of us have? How many can we use at one time is another question. Most of us have more radios than we're going to use at any one time. Now, you could think of replacing them and selling them back to the dealer. But in fairness, most radios have a very, very, very low resale value when you're selling back to a dealer. If you're selling it on a private sale, chances are somebody's going to give you earache over something like, oh, this button's got a little bit of wear on it or whatever. And in fairness, most of us have radios that we've upgraded but haven't got rid of yet. And the old radio was working perfectly okay before we upgraded it. So, we could put that in the second shack. And in fairness, it makes quite a sensible option because it's a very cheap option. You're not going to get much reselling your radio, so you might as well carry on using it and put it into a second shack somewhere. It also reduces the amount of weight you have to take with you in travelling and boot space and that sort of thing. If you're driving, not such a problem, but if you're travelling other ways other than driving, carrying all that weight backwards and forwards with you becomes a bit of a nightmare. So if you can set up a shack at a place where you go quite regularly, makes a lot of sense from that point of view. Now, do you take it with you or do you ship it? Well, once again, depends how you're travelling to your location. If you're going to drive there, take it in the back of the car and set your shack up. Now, the advantage of taking it there and leaving it there is that the equipment's not getting bounced around the back of the car going up and down the motorway or whatever. You know, it only has to do the trip once, so it's less likely to get damaged. If you aren't travelling by car, then potentially there are a couple of ways you can get your equipment to the remote location. Either ship it via one of the parcel shipping companies, which could be expensive, but probably less expensive than making a special trip driving there. Or if it's a friend or family location, chances are another member of your family is going to go there at some point in time. And maybe they'll take some gear down for you, and you could do it over multiple trips. So that's probably the best way of getting it to a location if you're not driving yourself. So what type of operating are you going to do? Well, a lot of it depends on the site you've got and the site location, the size, and activities from that location. Now, quite honestly, often it's worth just having a listen round, see what other local amateurs in the area are doing. You tend to find that amateurs get into pockets of activity. So if you find that everybody in your area is operating UHF and you're a rag chewer, then you want to be on UHF. If they're operating ATV, obviously the same applies. So kind of know your area, and you may find that certain areas, some frequencies are just not usable due to local interference that you can't do anything about. So you could operate HF. HF, obviously you need far more space to put up an HF antenna, although there are some nice little portable antennas that you can get, but the small ones obviously don't perform as well as a full-sized antenna. You could operate VHF and UHF. Nothing wrong with that. And with today's digital modes and connecting to repeaters, pretty much get worldwide coverage doing those sort of things. You may decide you want to do satellites. Well, with a satellite handheld Yagi, something like an antenna or an elk antenna, you could work satellites from a location, and obviously as long as you've got the prediction software with you to predict when the satellite's coming over, you should be able to work satellites. But don't forget being an SWL, a shortwave listener. A lot of fun gets had by being a shortwave listener, and you may find that you just want to be a shortwave listener. And once again, there's nothing wrong with being a shortwave listener, and give it a try. You may just need a receiver or a software-defined receiver and a laptop. Various things you need to think about on those. So, when it comes to packing up the station, you may, with a bit of luck, be allowed to leave the station set up full time. I know that if my mum was still with us, she would say to me, "Mine, here's the room, do what you want, you can have that one." And I'd have a second shack on at my mum's. At Colin's location, Colin and I share a second shack. He's only allowed to listen, and I've got a couple of small radios out there at the moment, and the shack is growing over time, so it's quite useful. But what that means is that I don't have to take any radios with me when I go to Ireland. You know, I don't have to carry them, I don't have to load the boot of the car up because I've got gear out there to operate anyway. Once again, if you're going to pack it away, you need to pack it away in dry containers, waterproof containers, that so that if any rain or anything drops on, or moisture drops on it, it won't penetrate the devices. And don't forget, when you unpack a device, you might say unpack a radio, if you've been storing it somewhere cold, like in the loft or whatever, it may be dry in that box. When you open that box in a warm environment, you're likely to get condensation build-up inside the radio. So a good suggestion is, if you're going to do that, open the box and let the radio breathe for at least a couple of hours to come up to room temperature, and hopefully the condensation will have disappeared, preferably overnight, but at least a couple of hours, because you don't want condensation causing problems and then suddenly find that you got an expensive bill. Okay, so we've got our shack set up on the location. A few items that I think become necessary to have if you're setting up a second shack, and this is not purely radio, but this is to make sure you can do radio, and that is the radio manual. You might have bought your radio years ago. It might have been your pride and joy, and you've decided to move it to your second shack because you've just bought the new shiny radio with a coloured display and whatever. Please send the manual out there, because if you haven't got the manual at your second location, you will find you will need to look something up. And as simple as any radio can be, you always need to look something up or confirm something. So having the radio manual with you is something worth make sure you have on site. Some tools, basic tools. You don't need a mega toolkit, but some basic tools, screwdrivers, cutters, pliers, those sort of things. Makes your life a lot easier, and you know you'll use them, I guarantee. A soldering iron, not necessarily a massive heat-controlled solder station. You don't need anything like that, but it's just a normal 25-watt soldering iron, just so you can do any minor repairs. I would suggest you have a multimeter, Once again, very useful for checking fuses, making sure the voltages are there and those sort of things. Doesn't have to be an expensive one. You're just doing quick and dirty checks, so that's the use of that. One of the things that's probably one of the most important things you need in your toolbox there is a lot of cable ties, because cable ties get used for everything, for tying cables together, for making things neat and tidy, for holding cables out of the way. And often I've used them in a holiday situation as insulators, where you just loop them round into a loop and they become the insulator between the end of the antenna wire and the rope that you're holding the antenna up with. Now, it's not the strongest insulator and not necessarily the best one, but in the short term, for a few days, they work perfectly okay. I mentioned rope. Rope, cord and string. Depending on what type of antenna you're going to put up, ropes, cord and string. You always need some. There's no way around it. You always find you need some. So a little bit of whatever you can find is worth putting in the box, your toolbox out there. Paper pads, pens and pencils. We often forget these. You need to record what you're doing. You need to make notes while you're talking to somebody so you can hold an intelligent conversation, those sort of things. So paper pads and pens, most useful. If you've got a spare old laptop, exactly the same as a computer, well, an old laptop's got a zero resale value really, but becomes a good shack computer. And if it's got internet connection and your remote shack's got access to the internet, you can do logging, you can do satellite tracking, you can do all sorts of things and look up things on the internet like call signs via QRZ. So a useful thing to have on site. I'm going through quite a list here, but hopefully they're useful to you. Things like electrical tape and self-amalgamating tape, very useful to have. You often need a bit of tape just to tape something up. And self-amalgamating tape, if you're putting aerial plugs outside and leaving them up for a few days, you don't want the water getting into your coax, so something worth having. A few ferrites I'd suggest, ferrite crampons. Now, you shouldn't be causing interference, but if you've got a few of these in your toolbox, if you need them, you can clip them on a wire and away you go. It will kill any interference on the cable. And I got called out once in Ireland with a switch mode power supply and a radio, and the radio didn't draw anywhere near the amount of current that the maximum current this power supply could produce, but RF getting back into it down the HT lead, unfortunately, used to shut the power supply down. But a small ferrite on the power cable soon solved that problem. So that could be useful. Sorry, you might want to take QSL cards out with you, just in case you meet up with somebody and want to give them a QSL card because you've worked somebody local and they collect them. And I would suggest you also have the odd reference book, something like the RSGB Communications Handbook or the ARRL Handbook. You can often pick these up at rallies very, very cheaply if they're not the current version. And most of the information in them is still very, very valid. So kind of, if you pick up, say, an ARRL handbook for £2 or £3 at a rally, that could be a very, very useful technical reference book to have with you. Antennas, well, once again, you've got to store them effectively. What type of antenna you're thinking? Well, at a holiday shack, I would suggest you're not thinking about putting a tower with a rotator and a beam on it. So we're talking about potentially dipoles and ground plane antennas, and maybe mobile whips set up in dipole configuration, that sort of thing. But don't forget, guys, the idea is when you've finished operating there, I would suggest you disconnect the antenna and maybe ground it, because you don't want a lightning strike hitting the antenna and effectively burning the house down or putting a big burn mark across a carpet or something like that. Or, and bearing in mind, it'll also damage your rig if it's still plugged in. So, and just a few ideas to what you can do with your old radio. And for somebody like me who travels out to Ireland quite regularly to see Colin, it's certainly nice having a second shack out there. There's a number of places I'd love to have even other second and third shacks, but we'll make do with one at the moment. I hope this has been of interest, and I hope you all got something out of it.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
As we come to the end of podcast 257, I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we did recording it. The guys and I have great fun recording them, and as you may guess from some of the little clues, we probably take about 3 hours to record this because we put the world to rights. But thoroughly enjoyable. And, in fairness, I think that's what gives us the enjoyment of doing it and keeps you guys coming back. If you'd like to get more involved, don't forget, check out the website. The website has updates on various news stories as they come out, some that don't make it into the podcast, but we also have a certain amount of other things that come up there. While you're on the website, why not sign up to Colin's newsletter? Colin emails out significant information every now and again. He doesn't bombard you with news, but just a few updates that you may have missed from other ways. And if you want to contact Colin and I, well, we're on Facebook and Twitter. The ICQ podcast is on Facebook. Colin and I are both on Twitter, and we're both on LinkedIn. And I'm sure, in fact, I know pretty much that most of the other presenters have a similar social media footprint. Few problems last year in 2017. We had a few people unable to download some of the earlier podcasts, and the problem with that was that the main podcast downloading agent that most people got excited about back in around about 2008 was a thing called FeedBurner from Google. Google withdrew support on that, and in 2017 we forgot we'd got some going out via that, and the file size hit the maximum and there was nothing we could do, so we had to remove it down. But if you get the RSS feed from our website, you will be able to download all the episodes, so they are still available if you want to go back and listen to the first 40. I think Colin removed the first 40 from the internet, but from the FeedBurner, but they are still there. For this episode, I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH, Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL, Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU, and Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP, for their help in recording the news roundtable, and as I say, we always enjoy that. If you want to get involved, contact us via the website, or you can email us at info@icqpodcast.com, where your feedback is always welcomed, and we do respond to you, honest. And don't forget the newsletter. We do have a YouTube channel. It's not very, very active as such. We have a few videos up there that we've done. We're not a video podcast, but Colin also releases the standard audio podcast to YouTube. So if that would be a way that you wanted to listen to the ICQ podcast or to show some of your friends what we're up to, it is available that way if they can't find it any other way. But as I discussed at the end of the news roundtable, we are available on so many different media systems now that I need to sit down one day and work out exactly where we go out. So all that's left for me to do now is to say thank you each and every one of you for your downloads, and I say this most times that we really, really do appreciate your downloads. It's what makes us keep doing these, so thank you very, very much for your downloads. We appreciate those. And we also are thankful to our donors, our £1 a month donors and the one-off donors. You do help us keep this podcast advert free, so thank you very much for any donations you send our way. All that's left to do now is to make that nice Mrs. Butler a cup of tea when she comes in from work and find her a biscuit. So I'm going to say 73s to all, and don't forget guys, we'll do it in a fortnight's time. 73.